Welcome everyone. Thank you, Sue. Welcome everyone. We're glad to have you with us this morning, and happy to have one of our favorite hosts with us today. Noelle Aiken is joining us again from Petite Gardens. So Noelle, we're excited to have you with us. And I also want to introduce Sue Oiken and Ryan Anderson, our Kendal at Home team members who are here joining us this morning. And I'm Lynn Giacobbe. I'm the CEO here at Kendal at Home. So we are, or according to the transcript, I'm Lynn Kobe. So anyway, we're happy to have you here with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Noelle to get us ready for springtime and gardening and refreshing our gardens and our yards. And welcome, Noelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm so glad you could join me today. Right now, it's sunny in Oakwood Village. And I'm underneath an umbrella. That's why you don't see the sun. I'm a little shaded right now. But yeah, let's get started. We're talking about, it's time to garden. I think beginning of April is a really good time to consider a lot of different things. And there's still a lot of time to work on the garden. Right now, things are very, very wet out there. So we've got to be really careful. We don't want to walk around, walk in soil beds, walk on the lawn right now, just because the more walking around you do in wet, soggy soil conditions, the more compaction you do. And so that actually will push the air and the water out of the soil spaces, and that's not good for our soil. So we just have to be a little patient this season. We had a very wet winter with a lot of snow, and so needless to say, we're going to have to, wait until the spring rains slow down a little bit and get the soil to drain. So let's get started here. And I know everybody has questions, so usually we could do questions at the end, or you can put them in the chat and we can also look at them at the chat at the end. So the first thing that I always remind folks to think about, especially late winter, early spring, is pruning. It's one of the easiest tasks to do at this time of year, especially when you are pruning a deciduous plant, so a plant that loses its leaves. Tree and shrub, especially, where you can see the full structure of that plant. No leaves are getting in your way, no flowers are getting in your way, so you can see all of the branching and everything that you need in order to prune well. So we always say with spring flowering trees and shrubs like a forsythia, like a magnolia, because the star magnolias are starting to come out, you always wait until after they're finished blooming and that bloom cycle is complete, and then you go in and make your pruning cuts. For everything else, if it's a mid-season or kind of late season bloomer, you can go in and you can really do some good pruning. So any time of year, you're always looking for dead, diseased, damaged areas. Those can be pruned at any time, but especially after a heavy winter, you might find more incidences of that happening with your plant material, especially your woody plant material. So go in and remove suckering growth that's coming from the base or the trunk of the plant material, cutting that back as low as you can go. Water sprouts are real thin, very, very vertical growing branches. And when you look at a tree, especially, you can see these very thin vertical branching that's coming out of all different areas, trunks and main branches and so forth. And the water sprouts, they actually will pull water, nutrients, energy away from the main plant. So you always want to get rid of those, okay? Again, you're pruning them flush to whatever branch or trunk they're coming out of. Take care of anything that's crossing or weak inside that plant. That's always a good time to do that. And again, I mentioned damage. So anything diseased, damaged, dead, of course, you want to go ahead and remove that as well. So there's a couple pictures down here, but don't be afraid. When the forsythia is done blooming here in the lower left corner of this picture, when it's finished blooming, and if you need to do some, kind of reducing the height or the width of the plant material, don't be afraid to do that. Most plant material can take about 50% removal of their limbs. There are a few plant families that you really can't do that with, pines and spruces being two of them, where you don't really want to reduce that much. But for the most part, many other shrubs, especially deciduous shrubs, will take a really heavy pruning. Okay, so let's look at this next slide. And this is just an example of a tree. And obviously this tree has a lot of issues on the left-hand side. If you ever come across something that has a double leader, so 2 or 3 sometimes leaders that you find at the top of the plant, it really just needs a single leader. So you actually remove the weaker of the 2 and you make sure that the stronger leader is growing upright. Sometimes if the plant's small enough, you can get up there and actually put in a stake to that leader to make sure that it's starting to grow upright, straight upright for you. Crossing limbs again, weak growth. Here's the water sprouts. If you can see these very thin, very, very vertical, straight growing branches, and you think, where did those come from? But it happens to a lot of different plant materials, so that needs to be removed. If you see any kind of weak sprouting growth from the trunk, go ahead and clean up the trunk so it's nice and just bare. So you really want your trunk to be bare. You don't want little sprouts and little suckers coming out of the trunk as well. And then if you have something, if anyone grows pear trees, the older Bradford pears or older pear trees, and there's a lot of controversy with pears right now because they're becoming an invasive species next year in Ohio. But the older pear varieties, they used to have these very, very high angled branches, so they would get damaged all the time, because when you have a very, very high angle on the branching system, it's just hard to control that damage, especially because it catches all of the heavy snow and so forth. So sometimes you have to remove branches. So this right picture, of course, is the proper way to do this. Believe me, if it's a very large, let's say oak, we have a ton of older oaks throughout northeastern Ohio, oak and maple stands. And if this is a very large tree, you really need to have an arborist come in and do this. But if it's a manageable limb for you to handle, the process for removing a limb is going to be that first cut. If you see this number 1 right here, it's always underneath. And a lot of folks don't think it's not very intuitive, but the reason you make your first cut underneath, maybe a foot away from the trunk, is because if you start with a cut on top of the limb, it'll rip and it'll tear, and then you have to make additional cuts to kind of take care of it. So your first cut is underneath the limb, about halfway through the limb. And then your second cut is just outside, right next to it. You're going to cut all the way through. And that takes all the weight of that limb off. So you've removed that part. And now you're just dealing with about a foot long piece that you can have better control with. And then you go closer again, back to the trunk, right around the branch collar, at the edge of the branch collar, and you go ahead and make a clean cut again. Okay, we always want clean cuts with woody material, especially because if you have ragged or jagged cutting, what happens is it opens the plant up to more issues, disease and insect issues especially. So that clean cut is very important because it helps the tree or the shrub really start to renew and regenerate new growth much easier. Okay, so a little bit of tree pruning there. And then, as I mentioned, the pines and the spruces are a little bit different. You can prune them right now, but really what you're doing is you're just removing the newest candle, what we call a candle. So this newest growth that you'll see. Some pines and spruces are lovely. The new candles are sometimes pink and purple in the spring. And when they start to kind of mature and develop their green color, that's actually the perfect time to do this. And you're really only reducing that candle length by half. Okay, so it's a very light pruning with spruces and pines. So just be careful. But That's why you're just seeing the pruners here right at the tip of that entire candle. And what happens is when you remove that tip, and anytime you prune, you really need to anticipate more new growth. Pruning is all meant to promote new growth. So you get branching underneath where you pruned, okay? And sometimes new branching from that pruning point as well. So just be aware of that with candle evergreens that produce that way, okay? Arborvitaes don't produce that way. Taxus don't produce that way. Junipers don't produce that way. So you can still prune them fairly heavily, taking, probably about anywhere from 2 to 6 inches off the sides and the top, and not having any ill effects whatsoever. It's when you really start removing too much of the growth and you start moving into the brown areas, inner areas of that plant, where you could have some problems where it doesn't regenerate growth as well. But as long as you're cutting into green growth, you're okay. It will regenerate. Okay. Last one on the pruning, I do have a couple of pictures of rose pruning and hydrangea pruning and clematis pruning, okay? And these 3 families, you have to be a little bit more careful. And I always recommend that our customers, they wait until these plants start growing. I think it's you're so much more informed as to where the plant is producing new growth and where it is not, where it has been damaged again, or maybe even some of the canes or stems are dead now. They're just not productive. So that's what I usually look for. So if you're looking at roses, it could be a knockout rose, it could be a hybrid tea rose, it could be a climbing rose. You're always looking for this new growth. Okay, so these new little sprouts that are coming out in the springtime. And what this picture is showing you is that you just want to be a little bit careful in your pruning placement, but what you do is you prune down to the uppermost growth, and it's usually outward facing, so outward facing buds. And you would go ahead and you would cut at a 45-degree angle just above that new growth. Okay, this cut is a little bit too close to the new bud, like you might lose it if you're too close. And this one's a little bit too high because you're leaving a stump. So that's what this is showing, kind of right in between there. Okay, give it a little bit of room to grow and expand. So that's roses. Take out all the other stuff, all the weak stuff, weak branching, suckering growth, crossing, all of that stuff. And really what you're looking for, and I'm going to show you on the next slide, is you're looking for, with all roses, you're really looking for like 5 or 6 really nice main branches. And this goes for your shrub roses too, because shrub roses are so fast growing that they'll produce a lot of side shoots and so forth. So if you start with just, like 5 and kind of open up in the center, so there's good air circulation around those roses, that is perfect. Okay, so that's what you're really looking for after you prune and remove all of that other weak growth from your roses. Similarly with hydrangeas. Now this is just the Macrophylla Hydrangea. So it's your typical mop head hydrangea, big pom-pom flowers right on top, blue, pink, or white. Okay, and these guys, it's kind of the same thing. You are looking for new production, new growth on those stems. And what happens is when you see that new growth, you'll notice that there's going to be old brown stems that you can just reduce all the way down to the ground, no problem. And that's kind of what's showing down here with this sort of aqua color or cut down at the bottom here. Okay, so needless to say, that's pruning out all of that old material that's not producing anything. And so you want to remove those stems as best you can. Okay, so you're cleaning that out. That's usually 3-year-old wood or older. Okay, with macrophyllas, what you'll find is some of the plant material, when we have cold events, especially in March, April, and May, which we have had, that newer growth sometimes can die back. So we always talk about, keeping your protective materials close at hand in the garage and what have you, so you can cover the new growth on a Macrophylla hydrangea, because it can damage your buds for this coming season. So make sure that, you know, again, you've got to prune down and remove any of that damage down to the uppermost bud. Okay. So that's what we're looking at with the Macrophylla hydrangeas, and also the oak leaf hydrangeas. If anyone grows those, they have fabulous, huge textured leaves, really big oak leaf type leaves. And they both produce buds off of old wood. And so needless to say, they grew their buds last July. They're sitting there on the stems. They really do appreciate protection over the winter here in Northeast Ohio. And then again, you want to keep that protection close as we move into springtime. Okay. The other one that I wanted to mention on this slide here is Clematis. And I feel like if you don't know how to prune Clematis, the easiest thing to do is wait until spring when the new growth starts to come out, flush out. And so some Clematis types, they flush out all the way through the stems. Well, that means that you really are just trimming maybe a little bit off the top and taking some dead vining out of the middle of the plant and just cleaning it up and letting it go. That's usually a spring bloomer, an early blooming Clematis. Okay. If the Clematis just, you know, starts to flush out growth, but it's only maybe halfway up the stems, okay, no problem. You can prune and take the top half off and then go ahead and clean out the other areas that are not producing in that Clematis. Then you have fall blooming Clematis like Sweet Autumn, which is that real fragrant white blooming Clematis. It has smaller flowers, but it's very, very profuse and can grow very, very large. And so that type of Clematis, it starts to flush out at the base of the plant. And that's exactly what you want to do. You want to take all of that old wood off, go down to where the new green growth has started. And there you go. You're ready to go. That plant is going to fill up and grow and really take off again for you. So it's easy if you remember with roses, Macrophylla and oak leaf hydrangeas and Clematis, just wait until they start producing new growth. And as soon as you see that new growth, just prune down to the uppermost growth, clean it up, take out all of the dead stuff, damaged stuff, disease stuff, and you're ready to go. So that's always a good thing to remember. Okay.
Noel, can I ask a quick question related to the hydrangeas?
Mhm.
So you mentioned the winter cover. What do you recommend? Do you cover with burlap, or what do you
Yes.
recommend covering with?
So burlap, we'll also recommend doing a winter mulching, which you really won't apply until November. And, 4 to 6 inches of mulch around the base to really protect that crown. And then a
Okay.
burlap wrap. We also have a really cool product that's called Wilt Stop, if anybody's heard of Wilt Stop
Yeah.
before. And it's an anti-desiccant spray. It's basically a paraffin spray. And we use it November through February, March, to really stop the winter desiccation that occurs in Northeast Ohio. It's not necessarily the snow or the rain or winter weather that's bothering the plants. It's the cold air. And so that desiccating air that we have can really pull moisture out of the stems, pull moisture out of those buds that are sitting there. And so if you spray with wilt proof, wrap it with burlap, mulch 4 to 6 inches, ready to go. No problem. Okay. Yeah.
So it's really all of those combined.
Yes, it is. It really is. That's the best way. If you can do one of those, that's great. Wonderful. I will tell you that your newer hydrangea, Macrophylla hydrangeas, they are really starting to improve breeding and cold hardiness. A little bit better vigorous blooming on new wood. So these things are happening right now as we speak. And there's several new varieties out there that can bloom on old and new wood. However, it's always a better looking plant if you can give it some protection over the winter time. Yep. That's just
Right.
how
Thank
Northeast
you.
Ohio goes.
Right. That's right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think we kind of moved through pruning, and I think this is my last slide with pruning. Anybody have those ornamental grasses still up? They really need to get cut down. And we usually talk about doing that through the month of March. If you get a nice day to really cut them as short as you can go. The reason being is they have a very hard time producing new growth through that old wood. It's so dense that it'll almost stunt the plant. So you want to get out there as soon as you can and really cut those plants low. And I just showed, here's your grass in spring. Here's, you can tie them up like a straw bundle, and then you can go ahead and cut them as low as possible with a weed whacker, with head shears, whatever you have on hand. And then I actually take a hand rake and I rake through that low clump, if you will, and it takes out all the woody stems that are left over from last year. So something to think about. Definitely get those cut back as soon as you possibly can, because they're really starting to grow. Lawn care, it's a great time to consider lawns at this time of year. I'll touch on this very, very briefly, because we have videos and all different types of things available on petitegardencenter.com. But now is a great time to work on your lawn. It's actually the second best time to work on your lawn, because it's so wet in spring that you have to wait until the soil drains. And when it does, you can get out there and you can do things like raking, fluffing up the lawn, dethatching, putting your step 1 down for crabgrass, because when the forsythia are blooming and they're in full bloom, that's kind of our plant signal that it's time to put that crabgrass preventer down. You can also overseed or reseed a new area, not a problem, but just make sure that you are using the correct fertilizer for that. And if you are having issues with crabgrass, there is a step 1 crabgrass control for seeding. So you have to be very careful when you read labels, because if you put new grass seed down and then you put a crabgrass control or preventer on there, guess what? It won't let the grass seed germinate. So you just need to be careful. And there are products available out there that work with seeding. You just have to look for those. And of course, we can help you with those in that selection. I think we've got a little rainfall, so I hope you don't hear the pitter patter. Soil testing at this time of year is great. Your garden soil, your lawn soil, absolutely. We typically need to apply lime once a year. So I'll recommend that either applying it in the spring, because the moisture will really take it into the soil, or applying it in the fall. So it's really up to you. You don't need to do it at both times a year. You just need to do it once a year, typically in Northeast Ohio. So we're basically getting going with the lawns as soon as we can start really walking over the lawn areas. And just a quick show to show you the benefits of dethatching and coreration as well. We have very, very clay soil in this area. And so what happens is we tend to hold on to water. It's the smallest soil particle available out there in the earth. And so needless to say, clay soil particles, they combine very, very tightly. So that's why they don't let water drain out. So by dethatching an area, and really if you have more than a half layer of thatch, in this picture, it's actually 2 inches. That's a lot of thatch. But if you have more than a half inch of thatch, you really should consider dethatching the area. Thatch will catch everything you provide your lawn. So it will catch the fertilizer, it will catch an insect treatment, it will catch water, and it won't let it penetrate down into the roots and into the soil. So you're wasting money. If you're not dethatching and making sure your thatch layer is okay, you're wasting money applying all of these other things to make your lawn look better. So that's why dethatching is pretty important. And like I said, we just have to wait longer in spring to do it. I always recommend dethatching. It's just, you can almost do it throughout the growing season, but especially in fall, we tend to be a little bit drier. So it's a really good time to get out there and dethatch as well. And then the coreration, if you look down in the lower right, The whole idea here is with coreration, it's removing these plugs of soil, and you let the plugs sit. You don't need to clean up the plugs. They're fine right there on top of the lawn. But what it does is it lets that water and air penetrate down into the soil, and therefore the roots of your grasses start to grow deeper into the soil, which is always good. That means you don't have to water as often. And then most of our lawn type grasses, they produce tillers. So the tillers start moving out into the space, and that creates a denser lawn. And so your lawn is healthier in the long run, really starts to be very dense. The denser it is and the healthier it is, the more it's able to push out weeds. Okay, so all of these things can happen with just dethatching and then also coreration. So they're really good things. If you haven't done it in a few years, and you don't have to do it every year, it's just when you start to see issues in the lawn, sometimes we go right back and say, when's the last time you dethatched or you coreated? It will do some pretty amazing things when you get it done. So there you go with lawns. That's my little lawn overview. Bed prep, absolutely. Again, when we drain and our soil is a little bit less muddy or soggy, you can get out there and start prepping soil, add amendments to your soil. Whenever you add amendments to your soil, I'm going to show you this, but we unless you're living closer to the lake or you have a sandy pocket nearby the home, what happens is the glaciers came down and they really compressed our soils down. And then when they retreated, they doubly compressed soil. So we have a ton of clay in this area. And as you know, clay does not drain in the spring. It stays very soggy in the spring, but then come summer, it dries out, it cracks. It's a very, very inhospitable growing environment. So the things that you can do is you can add organic amendments. So organic amendments can be any type of organic matter that you see out and about, garden centers and so forth, where you can use compost, you can use peat products, you can use planting mixes and enriched soils, you can use bark, lots of different, you can use manure as well to really work that organic material into your soil. You want about 2/3 clay soil or original garden soil to about 1 part, or excuse me, I said 2 parts to about 1 part of these new organics. And then you go ahead and when you're mixing that in, that breaks up clay soil particles. And if you live closer to the lake, it also will help reduce the fast drainage that sand does to our plants. So everything dries out so quickly. So whenever you're adding organic matter, you're helping any type of soil that you have gardening. Now, when you do amendments, what you want to do is you want to make sure you're working on them at least 2 weeks before you start planting. Okay, because you want 2 weeks to settle the soil and make sure that it settles and it is ready to go. It takes care of all those air pockets, any type of issue you have, and then you're ready to plant. So I always say beginning of May is a really good time to work on your soil in your landscape and your veggie garden, what have you, because that'll give you 2 weeks to settle. And then come mid-May, hopefully, or end of May, you have a good bed to plant in. Okay, so that's basically gardening in a nutshell. Right now, you absolutely can feed your plants, again, if you're walking around and you don't leave squishy footprints around. Okay, if not, just wait until the soil drains a little bit better. Wait until we don't have a lot of rain fall in the area. And so now is a great time to feed your deciduous plants. Okay, and you would apply plant tone at spring and then also mid-summer. And then your evergreens can be fed now, and we use holly tone on evergreens, and you can apply that spring, midsummer, and actually late fall. So anytime you can get some fertilization out there, it's really going to benefit your plants, especially as they're waking up from the winter and they've had some damage and so forth. It'll really, really help. Okay. Really quick, this is a slide for those of you that don't know a lot about fertilizer ratios, and every package of fertilizer is fairly concentrated in these three elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And the easiest way to look at a fertilizer ratio and go, how is this going to help my plants, is the first number, the nitrogen number, is the up number. So it always helps the foliage, okay? So when you look at lawn fertilizer, it's real high in nitrogen, like 32% nitrogen. It's because it's greening up your lawn. It's going to help that foliage. Okay. The second number is the down number, or phosphorus, and phosphorus really helps develop root systems. But a little hint for you is that phosphorus will also push flowers and plants into bud and bloom cycle. So if you have some tomatoes that aren't blooming for whatever reason, you think, oh my gosh, what is going on? You could actually feed them a little bit more phosphorus, and that will help force blooming. Okay. And then the third macronutrient is potassium, and potassium is all around growth. And so it will induce all around growth throughout the plant. So those three numbers are pretty important. You want to make sure that they're represented in a good fertilizer. And so it's the up, down, and all around numbers. And you can see plant tone there off to the left-hand side is a 533, what we call a multi-purpose fertilizer, organic fertilizer. It is slow release, and it is a little bit higher in nitrogen because it helps everything green up and grow. And then it is very supportive or balanced for the phosphorus and the potassium as well. Okay. Down below is a synthetic fertilizer. Okay. And this is Petite root stimulator. Just to give you an idea, this is a liquid concentrate. And so typically with synthetic fertilizers, you see higher ratios of numbers sometimes, and that's okay. They work fine, but we always like to use organics, especially around edibles and so forth. And with the plant starter, it's 4% nitrogen, so it's a lower number of nitrogen, and then 10% phosphorus, again, because phosphorus develops root systems. So if you think about that, and then 3 potassium. So balanced on either end, but it definitely has a higher percentage of phosphorus to get roots growing, which is its purpose. Okay. Okay, planting wise, I'm just going to show you planting trees and shrubs. I don't know how long it's been, but planting has really kind of changed. And our industry, especially, we used to dig very deep holes and set plants in deeper holes and backfill, and that in clay soil, that just creates a sink where water just sits, and then the root system goes ahead and drowns in that hole, and then the next thing you know, you've lost the plant. So what we do is we actually, when we're planting plants, we actually dig the hole twice as wide as the plant root ball. Okay, so let's say you have a 4-inch marigold that you're planting, you would just dig that hole 8 inches wide. And what you're doing is you're pulling out existing soil, and that will help because you want to amend that soil. Like I mentioned before, with compost or leaf litter or what have you, you would amend that soil, and then you're backfilling with that soil. Okay, you use your fertilizer, you go ahead and backfill with the fertilizer as well, and then you go ahead and mulch and water. So mulching's really beneficial. I'll always tell people, 1 to 2 inches of mulch, that's all you need. You do not need to pile on mulch. We don't need to make volcanoes at the base of trees. That's not healthy at all. So again, all of those things are very, very good to do. Just make sure that you're amending soil, feeding, and then watering and mulching. Okay, so that's very, very important. I was going to say that you can start planting as soon as the soil is not soggy. Okay, so in springtime, you can start planting as soon as you can dig in your soil, and you can plant trees and shrubs really as soon as they're available at the garden centers. You can plant perennials. I usually start planting perennials this week in April, because most of them have been out and have been acclimated to the colder temperatures. So, that's something to look forward to. But then when you move into your warm weather crops, so things like tomatoes and, your marigolds, your petunias, you usually want to wait until about mid-May to end of May, after the last chance of spring frost. You can plant bulbs now. So bulbs are fine to plant now. You can plant pansies and violas now. You can plant primrose, those types of things. So cold weather crops you can plant now. You can plant lettuces now. You can plant broccoli as long as your soil isn't soggy. Okay, so we do a lot of container gardening with cold weather crops just because you can plant when it's cooler out, and they do great in containers. And of course, potting mixes and containers with drainage, the water will definitely drain out a lot faster than what it does in a garden bed at this time of year. So that's something to consider as well. Okay. Planting continued. I just wanted to mention, if you want to transplant or divide plant material now, it's a good time to do it again once the soil drains out. And typically what you're looking at is a midsummer bloomer or a fall bloomer. It's the perfect time to do it. So we always look at opposite season bloomers to transplant and divide in the spring. If it's a spring bloomer, you typically want to transplant and divide in the fall. Okay, so keep that in mind. And I mentioned about the mulch and so forth, and watering. In this area, if you're watering 1 inch of water once per week, that's all you need. And it needs to be a very deep, thorough watering. We'll always recommend soaker hoses and drip systems and so forth that are closer to the root system of the plant. You don't want to water on top of the plant material. You want to put it right at the root system where it needs it, and the roots can go deeper into the soil and follow the water down into the soil. That makes a much healthier plant. So when it comes to drought time in summer, the root systems aren't up at the top of the soil waiting for somebody to water them. Okay, and mulch helps that too. Mulch will keep that moisture down into the soil. Okay, oh, there's the lovely volcanoes, tree volcanoes. So the one in the middle here is a bad mulch job. You don't want that to happen. You actually want the tree to have a flare down at the bottom, slightly flared, and the mulch can be, sure, it can be kind of curved up or banked up at the sides out at the drip line, but you want to reduce it as you're moving towards the tree flare. And this actually helps, moisture move in towards the root system, the fibrous root system. And then dividing, just to show you a picture, like daylilies at this time of year, hosta at this time of year, is really easy to dig them up and divide their different crowns or pips and just replant them or give them away. There's plenty of garden clubs and plant fairs coming up at this time of year. So keep that in mind. Okay, container gardening, I mentioned it before. It's really a good time to start container gardening. If you enjoy, really growing some cool weather crops, absolutely start planting. We can start seeds still at this time of year. So your warm weather crops, you still have 2 months before you're really putting them out there in the garden. So start your seeds now, no problem whatsoever. You can plant all the early bloomers, not a problem. You can do that now. So I wouldn't worry about it. And if you have any house plants, tropical plants, indoor plants that need to get divided or repotted or pruned even, this is a very good time to do it. It's the best time to really take care of their needs. Give them some new potting soil, maybe move them up into the next size pot, root prune, take off old roots and thick roots and roots that don't look very good, and go ahead and feed them now too. So really good time to take care of your container plants. Just some little inspiration there for some spring containers. So all of these plants are available right now, and they're ready to go, ready to plant in containers, that is, not in the ground, not until it, again, drains out. And I'm sorry I keep mentioning it, but it's true. We're just a little bit too wet right now. Okay, miscellaneous garden tasks, make sure that you have clean tools especially when you're pruning, sanitized, sharpen, make all of those things happen, especially when you start cutting the lawn. Make sure your lawn blades are sharp so you don't have that kind of yellow rip off the top of the lawns. Sometimes that's the culprit of very yellow or drying lawns, is because the lawn blade hadn't been sharpened in 5 years, and it's just kind of tearing the lawn blades. Look for, oh gosh, here's one for you. If you've had any of these issues in your garden. So on the left side is the mole, and he makes little hills like what you see at the bottom. And on the right side is the vole. And a vole looks like a field mouse, really. It's kind of the same size, has a long tail, but they make these little trails, and they also damage plant material. They love to chew on the crowns and bark of woody plants right at the base. So you never notice it until your plant starts to leaf out and starts to bloom, and you think, oh my gosh, half of my plant is dead and the other half is fine. It's usually vole damage, VOLES. So they really, can do a job on landscape materials if you're not watching for it. So make sure you watch out for it. The repellent Molmax is at the top. It works for both. And then of course, after, if repellents are not working and trapping's not working, then you can go ahead and set different types of traps. So that's a mole trap down at the bottom, and it's a little bit sad. I don't like to talk about those, but needless to say, I hope the repellents work well for you if you have an issue like this. And then of course you have to watch out for browsing at this time of year as well. The deer are very active. They had a tough winter. They will be eating. They will be browsing any new growth they can get their lips on. And so needless to say, watch out. You might need to, think about some fencing or netting or repellents, and Plant Skid is pictured here. It's just one of the many repellents that we offer here at Petite's. Plant Skid is organic certified, organic gardening certified. So it is one that we recommend for, serious organic gardeners, to protect their plant material. So needless to say, lots of different formulations and things. Just use what works best for you, and don't forget to reapply. Okay. That's always something very, very important. And on the right, it's just some pictures of some perennial plant material that usually works very, very well for us as far as deer resistant plant materials that's available. And we have really long lists of different types of deer resistant plant material out there. I'm going to tell you, if it's in the mint family, so Russian sage is in the mint family, lavender is in the mint family, Agastaki, which we call hummingbird mint, is obviously in the mint family, Nepeta or cat mint. So we've got 4 very, very popular perennials right there that have excellent deer resistance, because again, they're part of the mint family. So they're flowering mints. Oh, I forgot Monarda. So bee balm is right there. The red tufted bee balm is right there. So that's in the mint family too. So when you find plants that have really good, strong fragrance, are very aromatic, especially in their foliage and in their flowering, that's always really good. That works very, very well to repel the browsing, especially by bunnies and deer. Okay, so keep that one in mind. And I'm going to tell you, this was my last slide here for kind of waking up the garden and getting growing. I don't know if we want to do some questions now, or if I should take the tour. Lynn, what do you think?
I have a question, Noelle, before we go on the tour.
Mhm.
I wonder if you could tell, you were talking about the watering and the mulch, and I don't know if anybody else has had this problem, but last year I had a significant issue with stinkhorn
Okay.
in the mulch, and it drove me crazy. I know it doesn't do any damage to plants, but are there ways of preventing fungus in the mulch, or things that
Yes.
you can do to stop that from happening?
Yes, absolutely. So mulches, I should have said, mulches don't need to be applied every year. Again, if you have 1 to 2 inches that are remaining, they're slowly breaking down underneath. And that's good because they're a good natural soil amendment. But when we have wet seasons like we had last year, it was really wet. And so you're always going to see an uptick in any type of fungal growth, whether it's on plant material, mulches, in the soil, so on and so forth. Okay. So the best thing that you can do is if you find fungal issues in mulch, first, just take a shovel and physically remove them. Okay. Do not throw them in a compost pile. Put them in the trash. Okay. So physically remove and then try to aerate the area. So all we do is we just take a rake and kind of fluff up the area. So you're providing a little bit more air, breaking up the mulch a little bit more so it dries out a little bit better. Okay. And then you can also use lime. Lime will help reduce acidity. And so lots of times we'll find fungal issues do like more acidic, wet soil conditions. So when you apply a little bit of lime to those areas, that helps reduce the occurrence of fungal issues. Okay. So all those things can help. But sometimes you can't do anything about Mother Nature. And that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. It's just very, very wet to get out there and get started with things.
Right.
But next week looks good. Next week looks drier, right? We're going to keep our fingers crossed. So needless to say, it's just a matter of time. It can happen, within just a couple days, water will start evaporating and draining. And the next thing we know, we're ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we take a quick tour before our time is up? I'd love to see some of the plants and hear some of your recommendations.
Okay. Very good. Let me just, I'm going to change out.
And Kim is asking if there's anything you can do in the spring to discourage slugs. She has a beautiful large shade garden, but slugs have the hostas. They love the hostas.
For sure. Actually, so slugs, again, another fan of wet soils, wet weather, they abound. But really there's several things that you can do. I like to use, I eat a lot of citrus fruit. And so if you're a citrus fruit eater, clementines, grapefruit, oranges, whatever you like, you save all those peels and you put the peels out in around the plant material that you're getting the damage with slugs. They love citrus fruit. Okay. So they'll climb right into the rinds and then you just scoop them up and again, toss those in the trash. Okay. I will have to say that most of your, I can't say all because I'm not sure if it's all, but all of the slug repellents that you find at Petite's are organic. They are iron phosphate. And what you can do is you can put iron phosphate granules around the plant areas that are getting damaged by slugs. They roll over the iron phosphate and they absorb it and of course die from that. Okay. The old solution used to be putting pans of beer outside, like in a pie pan, but the price of beer, I don't think anybody wants to waste their beer outside trying to collect slugs. Okay. So I figure orange rinds are better, or an iron phosphate slug bait is what you'll find will work pretty well for you. And that's non-toxic to animals. There might still be some slug baits out there, so you've got to read the label, but there were older varieties that were toxic to animals. So again, up to you, your choice, but most of the iron phosphides are not. So don't worry about those. Okay, let me switch over. Sure. I am such a ding dong that I forgot my Apple phone doesn't have a jack for headphones. So,
oh, okay.
So here we go. Okay. And then can everybody see me okay? And can everybody hear me okay?
Right now we sure can.
I'm going to mute this.
Okay. There's one, while you're getting set there. Oh, well, can you hear
Sorry,
me?
I am having technical difficulties, so I might just take my laptop with me and go.
Okay, all right. Kathy's asking a question about adding organic matter to existing plants. Your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I heard it, Lynn, like getting organic matter.
Adding organic matter to existing plants.
Okay, so if you can do little by little, every year, you go ahead and you add an inch or two of compost around your plant material. And you work on that every year, and you don't have to do it twice, but you can do it in the spring or you can do it in the fall. And I'm going to tell you, it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference in how easy you can dig into your soil, how better performing your plants do for you. It just makes a huge difference. So little by little, it is not a big conversion all at once. Now, if you are growing in raised gardens or what have you, that would be a little bit different thing. Because if you're starting a new raised garden or you're cleaning out the soil and you want to start all new, then you of course would add your 6 inches or so of your new organic material. But it's just little by little right now. Yeah,
Okay.
just little by little. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Kathy, does that answer your question?
Noelle, can you close your presentation, stop sharing your screen so that
Yeah.
we can see you a little larger?
Yeah, sure. I wondered what was happening. Okay. So everybody, yeah, we're out in the annual house, and right now I'm by some violas, but I wanted to show you because these just came in.
Oh, the hydrangeas.
The hydrangeas are in. So you know that Easter is coming, obviously. And so those are all Macrophylla hydrangeas. So those are the ones that I was talking about. These hydrangeas are forced hydrangeas for early blooming. They're not they're fine. You can plant them out in the garden, once we get past cold temperatures, because if you put one of these out in the garden, today, and we get freezing temperatures, you'll totally kill the flowers and all the top growth on them. So they're still tender right now. But I'm going to tell you, they are hardy. They do require protection over winter. And so needless to say, they definitely are available right now to enjoy indoors or under cover. And I wouldn't plant them out just yet. Okay, so just be aware. We have pansies. Pansies and violas abound. It smells wonderful in here. They have such a sweet, very light fragrance, but there's so many of them right now. The greenhouse smells wonderful. I also wanted to show you lettuce bowls. If anybody's doing some container gardening, we have spinach, different types of lettuce, romaine, and so forth. And then the strawberry baskets are also ready to go. Can you see those okay? So strawberry baskets. So
we can see them well. Yes.
Yeah. So lots of vegetables. Again, you don't necessarily want to put the strawberries out on a nice mild day. You can put them outside, but you want to try to get them acclimated slowly but surely outdoors. So if you're taking, because strawberries are not necessarily a cold crop, but if you are, today is not bad. It's mild out, 50 degrees. You can go ahead and start them very slowly in like a shady area, kind of undercover, if you will, and you can leave them out during the day and then bring them in at night, especially if it's below like 40 degrees. And then go ahead and you can do kind of the slow acclimation, expose them out to a little bit more sun, expose them out to a little bit more temperatures. You can get those strawberries to start growing outside a lot faster, right? So something to think about when you start. Oh, I walked right past them. So,
Oh, those are gorgeous.
yeah. So all of your, not Asiatics, but your stargazers. So needless to say, the stargazer lilies, again, have been forced to go with the Easter lilies. As heck. So don't be afraid after you enjoy them for the Easter holidays. They plant and they grow very, very well outdoors. So don't be afraid to use those outside. Okay, I just moved into our perennial area. Whoops, I want to try to get this camera to stop shaking. And we are in the shade garden area. So we have coral bells, all different colors. We have Chinese forget-me-not or Brunnera. There's some junipers and some rhododendron just starting to bud up. Those are PJM rhododendrons. So plenty of color. Uh-oh. No. Did I lose you?
No, we're still here.
Oh, good. I thought my presentation just came up again, and so I don't know what happened if I hit like a.
No, we see you.
Great. You see me try to figure out what the heck happened. Let me see if I can keep on keeping on. Lots of flowering trees are in bloom. So it's a weeping cherry, what we call a snow fountain cherry. And my gosh, there's also a lot of trees out here that are not even close to being leafed out yet, because we still have a couple of weeks, I would say at least, not to have any of that color or even leaf showing right now. So I won't go over to the tree section with you. Let me walk up to some more perennials. And just so you can see, there's definitely color, a lot of spring bloomers out. I'm going to show you. This is a cool little plant. This is Mossy Sextaphrasia. And it's a great early bloomer. Beautiful green, kind of mossy foliage, really fun in the garden. They love rock gardens and all those types of things. So it's really, really great to have. And also just to plant in containers, they make nice little accents. Here's Primrose. So these Primrose are ready to go. They can be planted as soon as we get some good drainage out there. And then I'm going to walk over to the forget-me-nots. There's some
And
blue
Noelle, those
forget-me-nots.
those primrose will keep blooming, re-blooming all summer long, right?
Well, good question. No, not necessarily. So when you see early blooming, a lot of the early blooming perennial material is going to be kind of like wildflowers, where they're ephemeral. Okay. So they don't necessarily, they really like cold temperatures. It's kind of like pansies and violas.
Okay.
You provide them with cool temperatures, they do great. They're going to keep on growing. And then the next thing you know, the heat of the summer starts and they say, forget it. we're not doing that, but they'll come back for you. Okay. So at least you'll always have something, in the spring that's blooming early for you. So that's really the difference between some of the more early spring bloomers. And when we start to get into the growing season, those tend to be a little bit better as far as repeat and continue to bloom for you. Okay. And it really has to do with the temperatures, the heat, and so forth. Bellis daisies. So these are an English daisy. Okay. And then of course we have our little silver mound artemisia. That's always a great plant to grow and very deer resistant. And then these guys are all anemones. These are spring anemones. So they're a little bit different. We have fall anemones, spring anemones, and they all grow from these little corms, which look like little pieces of charcoal. But they all produce beautiful, beautiful flowers. And then I was surprised. I came out here the other day and I wanted to show you that these are hardy bellflowers. Bellflowers will repeat bloom for you, but they looked gorgeous. So this is purple and white bellflowers or campanula. So they're looking beautiful. And we're starting to see carnations come out too. I'm gonna roll over there. And this combination is actually a white dianthus or carnation type dianthus. So this one's called Frosty. And then right behind it, that pink is called Armeria or Sea Thrift. And I love it, especially for folks that have like mailbox plantings and things like that. They are really, 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 really good with pollution, salt, poor soil conditions. So down by the mailbox is really nice to plant Armeria because they can tolerate it all. It's really a great little plant. And then I think maybe what I'll do is I wanted to show you blanket flowers are just starting. This is also known as Gaillardia. They're just starting up here. And they're a great, pollinator plant, deer resistant, native, all those types of things, all that good stuff. And then I'll go up top here and see what else is blooming. Like creeping phlox is not blooming yet. It's just too cold. I have the Lenten Roses that are looking gorgeous. Let me see if I can get a good picture. So Lenten Roses or Helleborus, they bloom at the time of Lent. Do you see them?
Yes. I never heard them called that before, though.
Oh my gosh, yes, they are
They're very
fantastic. Oh my gosh, deer resistant, early bloomers. There's some in that family that are called Christmas roses, so they start even earlier in the winter.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic in part shade gardens.
And they
Love
bloom
them.
outside even in the winter?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh my gosh.
They're up and blooming and looking gorgeous right now in the garden. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. And then let me just finish off. I'm going to show you some perennial violas. And these have a little bit more longevity in the garden than the annual type. They're a little bit bigger, a little bit, should I say, stockier or fuller plants. But they're all just beautiful. They have a little bit more heat resistance than some of the standard pansies and violas that you find as annuals. So these are really, really
Very
nice.
pretty.
Yeah, to
They're
keep them out in the
beautiful.
landscape. And I think that's, oh, I'll walk you this way. How close are we? Oop, we're a few over. Lynn, do you have any more questions? Anybody have any more questions?
No, I don't think so. I think you've answered many of them.
Okay, I wanted to show you really quick the star magnolias.
Okay.
Because they are in full bloom and they look lovely. They're actually little sprouts right now. Okay.
Oh my gosh, they are so pretty.
They're gorgeous. So they're going to be your earliest blooming magnolia. And then, you can see the forsythia just really coming out and being very showy.
Oh yeah, they look beautiful.
I think that's all for me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today. I so appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
No, it's great to see you again, and I'm sure we'll see you shopping at Petite soon.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks,
everybody.
Noelle. Thank you. And Ryan, do you have a last slide you want to share with us about upcoming programs?
Yep, just loading up right now. So let me share my screen now. So yeah, thank you all for joining us today. Just some upcoming events for us here. Next Wednesday, April 13th at 11 a.m. It's going to be a Kendal at Home seminar. It's Make a Plan with Kendal at Home. This is a virtual informational seminar for any of your friends, family, neighbors, loved ones, anyone who you think might be interested or might benefit from learning more about Kendal at Home. Please feel free to invite them to this. This is a virtual event. We are holding a bunch of in-person events as well, and those are up on our website. If you or your loved ones or friends want to do more of an in-person event, that's an option for them as well. Then next Friday, April 15th at 11 a.m. This is going to be by invitation only, so please inquire on it. But it's going to be a Meet the Team event with our two new staff members out in Massachusetts, regional sales member Lori Beckera and our new care coordinator Natalie Lopera. So that's going to be next Friday, April 15th at 11 a.m. Going to be very informal. Get to know who these new staff are out in Massachusetts. And then on Friday, April 29th at 11 a.m., that's going to be with the Oberlin Conservatory. Their Woodwind Quintet is going to be performing for us and talking through some of their pieces. So it's going to be a great event as normal, as we usually, as we're excited to welcome back the Oberlin Conservatory for that event. And as always, we do thank the Friends Foundation for the Aging for their generous support in helping us put on events such as the Oberlin Conservatory event for the general public as well as our members. Lynn, I think that's it from there.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. All righty. Well, want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.